welcome once again to our show, Our Shine Beyond Work. We are already in episode 4, and thank you so much for all the love and reviews that you've been sharing with us for our third episode. And today, once again, we have a very, very special guest who we've invited specifically to share about what he's doing beyond work. And this is actually work, but it is beyond the usual genre of work. So, Santosh, over to you.
Thanks, Sujata. And yes, on our show today, we have Kedar Sohoni. So Kedar has been, he's the founder director of Green Communities Foundation, or GCF as we know, which is more into waste management. And we'll get to know a lot more about it from Kedar. He is, of course, an IIT 1993 and IIM 1996 batch. But what led Kedar to go into social work of Green Communities Foundation, which he actually founded in 2016, we'll get to know more about that from him on this podcast. So hi Kedar, and welcome to this episode of Beyond Work, Ashai.
Hi Santosh and hi Sujata. So nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks Kedar. Our first question obviously is what led you to start Green Community Foundation, and tell us more about where exactly is Green Communities Foundation focusing on, which part of India, and tell us more about that.
Okay, so as a background, I've been an entrepreneur now for almost 23 years. And my first entrepreneurial stint started in the year 2000 when I set up a small market research organization called CrossTab. And I was running that for about 15 years. We set up a lot of organizations within that, subsidiary companies within the group. And I was actually managing a mobile analytics company at that time in the year 2015. And that organization got acquired by Nielsen. And so I moved to Nielsen as part of the acquisition. So that was my corporate journey. But in parallel, there was something else happening in my life. And this was, I got interested in personal fitness and personal health. And so moment you go into that space, you are worried about not just your exercise routine and all of that, but also what you eat, right? What are you, putting into your body?
Yeah.
And so I started I started getting more involved in organic food, organic produce, visiting farmers markets. I probably was the first time I met farmers, right? And so basically, I'm now connecting the dots looking back, right? I mean, you can always look back and say, okay, this is probably what was happening. But for me, it was like a natural progression while my corporate thing was going on. So I got interested in urban farming as a concept. Saying, okay, can I grow my own food? All of this was happening in parallel. And I attended a few workshops. I got interested in, like I said, urban farming. But quickly I realized that, when you are living in an apartment in Bombay, there is very little that you can produce, right? I mean, in terms of food.
Yeah.
And especially when your balcony orientation is not correct, you'll end up growing very little.
Yeah.
But that still sparked my interest in, you can say very broadly, the environment as such, right? In terms of what's happening to our food system and so on.
Yeah.
I did a workshop on sort of permaculture, as they call, where somebody taught me how to compost my food waste. And he actually came home and he taught me how to do that. And when I look back, I think that was the sort of single most critical event. It might seem like a very small step, but that I think was, led to many things later. So for example, I learned how to compost and I just got hooked onto it. So for the last 8 years, I have been continuously composting my food waste at home. And that was, like that magical moment that, you have this food waste and then you do something to it and it gets converted into compost. So maybe the engineer in me got very excited about this whole concept. And when I started to compost, it just, changed something inside me, I think. And, I started talking about this in my community. So this was, I think, roughly around 2015 or so.
Okay.
Okay. So I started talking about this in my community, and then one thing led to the other. I landed up implementing a large scale project completely as a volunteer, okay, in my own society.
Okay.
And so I learned about waste management, what is waste management, what is segregation. I connected with a lot of people. All of this was just a hobby at that time. And then I converted my society into a sort of a more green society, if I may call it, where we were composting our waste, we were segregating properly, our recyclables were getting, going into recycling.
And how many
so on.
flats we are talking about when you
This
say?
is about 220 apartments.
Okay, that's
so
quite
we
a
were
big,
generating
quite
about
a number.
200 kg of plus waste every day.
Wow.
So that was a game changer. So, and what really changed things again was we actually got an award for it.
Okay.
And while I was happy that, oh, we've got an award for doing this, frankly, I thought we had done some very basic things, like which every society has to do. And for just doing these basic things, if someone is giving you an award, it means that the rest of the communities are not doing anything at all. And so that again told me something that, oh, here is either it's a very hopeless situation that nobody is doing anything, or here is an opportunity for me to say, okay, you know what, it wasn't that difficult. I can sort of implement the same model in some other communities, because to me it seemed like a very simple, logical thing. Of course, it took a certain amount of time and effort, but to me it was saying that, oh, it's not that difficult. Why can't other neighboring societies do it? And so that sort of set me thinking. In parallel, my acquisition was happening now. Okay, so I had moved to Nielsen, and very quickly I was clear that I may not want to continue for a very long time. I may want to start something again on my own. So all of these were two parallel tracks. On one side, my waste management journey was happening, and then this whole acquisition had happened. And at some point, I was at the crossroads where I had to decide, what to do next. There were some other ideas brewing in my head in terms of analytics and so on. But I had done that for a while. So I said, maybe I should do something else. And that something else was staring right at me. And that was waste management. So I said, okay, why am I looking at something else? Here is something right in front of me. So then I think one fine day I just took a call saying that, okay, maybe this is what I should do moving forward. And so what we do today is we continue to work with several communities in Mumbai. So that remains the core of our work: segregation at source, recycling or enabling recycling. That is the main thing. Saving waste from basically going into the dumping ground. That remains our core activity. We've also set up an interesting rural program, because while when we think of waste, we immediately think of just urban waste. But our villages, they are drowning in waste, especially plastic waste. And so we have created an interesting program to create a reverse logistics system for all the plastic that the villages are consuming. So I can talk a little more about that. But yeah, these are the two areas of work today. Sort of longish answer, but that's how things transpire.
Listeners would like to know, wanted to know where it led you, to start off.
Yeah. And, especially I love the way that you humbly said that, the award. I mean, if you're getting an award for doing something so basic, right? You thought of it very differently. Whereas others may, possibly put that certificate, frame it and put it up on the wall and, talk about it to others, and, and then it stops there. But you decided to turn that spark into a fire, Kedar. So kudos on that. And that's why, we get to meet you as well, right? I mean, I think that's amazing. So Kedar, as you said, about the rural bit. So you can, possibly tell us a bit more about that. And when you said drowning in plastic waste, I think both Santosh and my eyes just kind of popped out. And, we were like, for me also, it was like villages, plastic, somewhere it doesn't connect, right? So tell us a bit more about that before we move on.
Yeah, see, what has happened is uh, if you look at the, especially the consumer goods industry, right? Uh, for the last 15, 20 years, all the large organizations and even small organizations have really forayed into the rural markets, for all kinds of personal products, right?
Yeah.
From food products and cosmetics and, any home care products and so on. And they have, of course, succeeded a lot in that. Like there is hardly a village you will find in the country where you won't find a sachet of shampoo or a chips packet or a biscuit and so on. So in terms of distribution, it can be the remotest hill, the remotest island, the remotest village in the country. I mean, I won't be surprised if you'll find, some kind of a sachet there. And while on the one hand, you may say, oh, now villagers are getting access to all of these products, which was only accessible to the urban consumers. Uh, First of all, these are all sachets. Okay, these are all plastic. They all come packaged in plastic. And more importantly, while these products find their way to the village, it's a one-way street. Very little comes out of the village in terms of recycling or taking it somewhere. So whatever amount of products or whatever amount of plastic the villages are consuming, it is getting quote unquote disposed then and there, and their method of disposal is horrific. So most of them, and we have done a survey, actually a large scale survey last year across the country, almost 85% of the consumers we interviewed, they burn their plastic, and that too in the chula. Okay, they find it very easy to start the fire. That's what they claim, especially all the wrappers and so on, they catch fire very quickly. And when you ask them, they said, oh, yeah, we don't have a problem. We burn it in the chula, or we burn it in the backyard, or we dump it somewhere in the village. And after a while, when it becomes like a mountain, you set fire to it. That's really the method of waste disposal in most of the villages, if I may say, in the country. Okay. And so, I mean, burning that kind of plastic is, I mean, straight up carcinogenic, right? I mean, there are so many other things that can happen, but the first thing that it can possibly cause is cancer. So, and most of the consumers are just not aware of this. They think of this as just burning firewood or something, right? So similarly, they burn plastic. So there is no reverse logistic system in most of the villages. And especially for non-saleable plastic. See, we think of plastic as, just one broad entity, but there is, if I may say, different types of plastic, right? So there is hard plastic where make chairs and buckets and, or even your bottles and so on are made out of. And then you have your wrappers, which are made of what is called multi-layer plastic. So these chairs and buckets and so on, they are still recyclable. You will find a kabadiwala even going to the villages, picking up all of that stuff. But the one thing which gets badly disposed is your thin plastic or multi-layer plastic or wrappers or consumer product packaging material, right? There is no value for that. And transporting that is of no use to anybody. It doesn't generate any revenue, and which is why it just lies there. So that's really the core of the problem, and that's what we are trying to solve. Thankfully, the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 recognizes this problem, and the government is taking some steps now to potentially solve that. But we are, a few years away before we see some large-scale solutions there. But the government has recognized this as an issue, and now we need action on the ground. So, yeah, we started almost 4 years back on this. We were a little early, if I may say, but I think we were a little late, because we should have started this, like someone should have started this 10 years back.
Yeah. So Kedar, you mentioned that the core of your the foundation has been in urban areas. I mean, starting off with your own society. How have you expanded that base and is it very much restricted to Mumbai, or do you have plans? So that's my first question. And the second one is more on the rural space as to how did you identify, that this particular village you need to kind of reach out to? What led you to be in that village, and how did it really evolve from both the fronts?
Right. So when it comes to urban, I think Mumbai itself is a big challenge, and unfortunately, while we have worked with quite a few communities, the sheer amount of waste that is generated, the kind of communities that exist, the complexity of the whole problem is so large that I think at least for the immediate future, we will just focus on Bombay. There is a lot to be done. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface, literally. And it's a big challenge because it's a multi-stakeholder problem. So it's not about just working with the community. You need to work with the municipal corporation. There are several stakeholders in between that you need to work. And so it's a big challenge. I think we need a lot to do still in Mumbai, especially at a large level, let's say a ward level. So we've been working with individual communities, right? Individual societies or or even slums and so on. Now we need to identify a ward and work with the BMC at least for a ward in Mumbai. And that's, in fact, we are just starting a project soon, sometime next month, in collaboration with a few other organizations. Hopefully, that will give us some learning, some scale, and so on. But yeah, I mean, we have our work cut out for Bombay itself. So I don't think we'll go to other cities immediately. In terms of the rural, so I was looking for a local partner so that we can start something at the village. Because see, as GCF or even personally, I have no large scale connects at the village level. So I said, there are several organizations, other NGOs, who work in so many villages in the country. Now, they may be working on healthcare or education. It doesn't matter. But what I was looking for is the community connect, the equity that they bring to the table. So I spoke to a number of organizations saying that, okay, I'm looking for someone to collaborate with. And that's when I met up with Swadesh Foundation. Swadesh works, or at that time, they used to work in about 7 talukas of Raigad district. And they used to cover almost 1,000 villages at that time, or more. Their idea was to create a dream village. Okay, a village which will be very good on certain parameters, like it could be education, healthcare, or water harvesting, and so on, sanitation, and so on. Now, when I spoke to them, I asked them about waste management. They said, okay, we don't have anything on waste. So I said, okay, it'll be nice if a dream village can also be managing their waste correctly. So they liked the concept, and that's how the collaboration started in 2019. And we started with a handful of villages, about 7 villages. And so the work started there. And unfortunately, again, 2020, we went into a lockdown. So we lost a year or so. But we picked that up in 2021. And today we are covering more than 200 villages. And we have created this reverse logistics system where we urge all the villagers to keep their plastic separate, not to burn it, not to litter it. And then we have a collection system. We collect all of that plastic waste, bring it to a central location, we sort it, and ensure it goes to the best destination possible. And we have some CSR support as well for that. So that's how we've done it.
So, Kedar, as you were speaking, what came to my mind was also a little bit of curiosity about the organization that you're running, right? So, how does this entire mechanism work, right? You are, I'm hoping fully focused on it as a full-time founder, but what about the rest of the organization? And the second part is, how do people receive this? right? I mean, you said Mumbai itself, there's a lot more to cover. So, our community is really responsive, buildings and, what to say, possibly ALMs. How do you really connect with all these people? So tell us a little more, because there may be some listeners who may really want to contribute to something like this
True.
beyond work, right? So for them
Yeah.
to understand a bit more about the organization.
Yeah, so my organization consists of about 9 people,
Mhm.
and they are all full-time employees.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the things I have tried to do is identify, people from the communities. And see, one thing I realized is that, waste management, if you look at it as an area of work, there is no vocational course.
Mm.
In waste management, the way at least I'm visualizing it in the entire country.
Mm.
And so, like you have plumbers and electricians and AC mechanics, and so for every kind of a problem that we face at home, we know who to reach out to,
Mm.
right? But if there is a waste management challenge, if someone wants to work on waste management, and you start looking at, are there trained professionals
Mm.
for this? I realize there are none. Those who are working in the space, they have learned this on the job, they have figured this out on their own, or they have just been there for a certain number of years and they have learned it. So either you have, on the one hand, you have people who work literally on the field, right, picking up garbage and so on. So you have that kind of a work pool. Or you have people who have done their post graduation in environmental engineering, or environmental science and so on.
Yeah.
But there is no equivalent of a plumber, electrician, someone
Mm.
who's maybe a 10th pass, 12th pass, but understands basics of segregation. What are the different types of plastic? I mean,
Mm.
it's not very complicated at all. And so in fact, we created a curriculum on waste management. And so we actually went to different foundations which do vocational training, and told them, look, I mean, here is a course that we have created. And one of the foundations actually, we ran that course together, and it is a very, very intensive course. And so we created these cadre of people who are knowledgeable in waste management. Probably very few of those kinds of people. So similarly, I go out and pick up people who are working in communities, maybe who are may not be even graduates sometimes, or
Mm.
they are
Mm.
graduates, they're looking for work,
Yeah.
and they want to do something in this space. And then we train them on various aspects of waste management. And today, probably they know more than, you know, maybe those who have postgraduate degrees in this space sometimes, because they've worked on the field and they are really interested in this. I think
True.
that's been our broad approach, to take people who really want to work in this space and train them.
Yeah.
In terms of the communities, how have they received it? See, what has happened is waste management, or rather for anyone to do any such task, right? I mean, there has to be a carrot and a stick, or a carrot or a stick. Now, unfortunately, most communities, they don't see an immediate benefit to them,
Mm.
okay, of doing waste management the scientific way. Why should they segregate? I mean, what's in it for them? And so on. Either, some people are that way, that, okay, I don't see a benefit of this. At the same time, they don't see any downfall of not doing waste management properly. So they
Mm.
are not penalized, or it doesn't happen that their waste is not picked up, or there are penalties, or things like that, harsh penalties.
Mm.
It unfortunately doesn't happen much in a city like Bombay. So it becomes like, okay, if I can get away with the easiest thing, which is doing maybe some basic stuff,
Yeah.
then people do that. But yes, of course, there are certain people who are aware, they come forward, or maybe some communities are aware,
Mm.
and that they realize that, even if no one is looking, I should be doing this. It's like, on a traffic signal, even if there is no cop standing there, some people stand at the traffic signal
Yeah.
because they know that this is the right thing to do. Right. But unfortunately, that number is relatively less when it comes to waste management.
Yeah.
And, the city as such has so many other problems, especially the slums and so on. I mean, they have umpteen number of problems. And waste, somewhere it falls down on the priority list and so on. So it just, it's a tough one to solve, and it needs a very, very, if I may say, strategic, at the same time tactical, a very detailed operational plan, and multi-stakeholders, all stakeholders coming together and agreeing on a common vision and implementing it. It's not easy to do this. So, but yeah, it has not happened, unfortunately, as of
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So, I'm sure apart from your 9 colleagues or with you, resourcing definitely is a challenge. You need the feet on street, the ones with hands to, be on the ground there, both in city as well as in villages. So I'm sure a lot of listeners could be interested in coming forward to do this kind of activity. So how could my first question is, how could they come forward? And the second one, which not really related to the first question, but what kind of challenges are there? Because it must be not an easy task, right? With varied stakeholders, sometimes even acceptance by those villagers to get into this mode itself must be a biggest challenge for you. So how have you been tackling that space?
Yeah, so I must say here that the villages were easier to onboard
Okay.
than the urban folk. I mean, it was relatively much easier, and they follow the process religiously. And it's very strange, but some of the villages, they are even today amazed that there is a truck coming to the village to pick up garbage. So whoever from our organization goes there, he's treated with chai and some snacks and so on. That, oh, he's come to pick up garbage. Now, like someone from the city who's listening to it will say, okay,
It's a
I
big
mean,
deal, right? For
what's
them,
the
yeah.
big deal? I mean, if they just ignore that truck, in fact,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But that's what happens in villages. And so, yeah, that's the first thing. The second is, yeah, when it comes to feet on street, see, every community, and now this applies to even the cities. See,
Yeah.
every community has at least these 5% of the people, who really want to do something. They are, self-motivated.
Yeah.
And while it is difficult to get the whole community to do something, they are, individual warriors. They keep doing their own bit.
Yeah.
They will try to avoid plastic, or they'll maybe even compost at home. They always do that. And let's say if we are taking up a project at a community, at a society, these are the ones who come forward immediately. So, you know what? If you're doing something in our space, then we want to volunteer for it, or they are our point of contact, and we work with them to implement. So that helps a lot. And the same thing applies to the villages as well. In fact, there are these village development committees which are responsible for this, and you always find a bunch of people everywhere who are a little extra excited about doing something like this.
Yeah.
And they then convert the fence sitters to do the right thing. So yeah, it helps a lot. I mean, we can't do without volunteers. And whenever someone says that, I want to work with your organization, I want to do volunteering with your organization, my first question to them is, okay, let's say, do you segregate at home? Do you compost at home? Or does your community do that? So a lot of times they say, no, they haven't really started this. So I said, okay, why don't you start with your own community? So you don't have to help us, just help yourself.
Yeah,
and we will guide
is
you.
a big, agree. Yeah.
So you become the champion in your own community.
Yeah.
And we will guide you, we will empower you, we'll give you all the information, but you start that spark in your own space. That's the easiest, right? I mean, you don't have to go anywhere.
True.
Yeah, and that's how a fire starts, right? One spark. And I think that is the message that possibly, Kedar, you want to leave our listeners with, right? start at home, start in your community, and then take it on. I wanted to ask you if you would like to add on to it as a message to our listeners.
Yeah, and see, till about maybe 7, 8 years back, I was totally oblivious to all of these aspects, right? So I can't really preach as such. So I was lucky to, get exposed to a space like this. And my intention was never to start a social venture. Okay, that was never there. So when I look for a venture, I look for something which is a large problem, something which I know something about, and where nobody is doing anything. So that's my sweet spot. Your ikigai kind of a thing when you
Correct. Yeah,
speak
yeah.
about, that's the spot, which is like, oh, I find this is a large enough issue and I know something about it. Right. So that's how I got into this, luckily. But what I would urge people to do is just maybe be aware of some of these aspects. And it's also a responsibility. See, when we are living in a city, we are um, taking advantage of certain infrastructure which is there. It becomes our responsibility to take care of, what is our output in terms of waste. It is our responsibility. Or a lot of civic issues. See, you can't be blind to that
Right.
for a very long time. And so just asking questions, maybe, asking questions like, okay, where does my waste go? What is the impact it has on the city and eventually myself? And playing your part in that. Now, you may not look at this as a social thing. It is for your personal benefit. Just think of it as a very selfish deed. You don't have to do anything for anyone else. Just do it for yourself because it is important for your own, health and your family's health. Just think about it that way.
Kedar Sohoni, founder director, Green Communities Foundation. Thank you so much, not just for being on this episode of Asha Beyond Work, but doing so much amazing work for the society at large, right? Because a lot of our listeners who are working professionals, etc., would like to get into this kind of space. And here's one role model who has already gone full time into it. And that's something really a big achievement. And I'm sure that's something very important for a country like India. Thanks once again for joining us on this episode.
Thank you so much. It was so nice talking to you, Santosh and Sujata.
Thank you, and keep inspiring. And I'm sure that you'll get a lot of queries. We'll pass them on to you.
Certainly.
And our email ID for everyone's attention once again is beyondwork23@gmail.com. Please do write into us about how you found the show, and if you want to reach our special guest, as I said, we can connect him to you. And take care. Thank you so much for being on the show once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.